Hey guys, I'm Ben Fetters with Sovereign SP, and in today's video we're going to be going over the Populate a Microsoft Word template action inside of Power Automate. It's an action I use all the time, and I've been meaning to put it on YouTube here for a while. But basically how it works is we're going to take a Word template file like this, put it into a SharePoint library, connect it to our Power Automate flow, and it's going to get some data from SharePoint, populate it into this Word template, and then it'll convert it into a PDF. And our final product will look something like this. Basically, if you've heard of Mail Merge before, this is the Power Automate version of Mail Merge. And this is something that we use in our company all the time with different clients. We use it for invoices, progress reports, weekly reports that get automatically created every week, as well as approval processes. So at the end of an approval process, we'll have a final PDF version of that process, and it'll include signatures, approval dates, and everything, right? It's really awesome, works great. There's a lot of use cases for it. So if you have any use case ideas as we're going throughout this video, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what your ideas are and how you utilize this action. This is, of course, a really simple and pretty interesting scenario here, but it will showcase all the different things that you can do. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to come back here into our Word document here, and we'll start a new file. Click on New. You could use one of these, but we'll just use a blank document. There we go. Now the first thing I like to do, I'm going to give you some helpful tips. I've made a lot of these, so I wanted to share some things that I do personally to make this whole process a little easier. And the first thing is, I always forget what tab it's in, but I believe it's the View tab. Maybe it's the Design, Layout tab, there it is. And I go to Margins, and I click on Narrow, so that just gives us some more space here. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually insert a table. And usually I just kind of come down here and do 4 or 5 or something like that. I'll do 5. And we'll create a table here. Once I select it, I'll go to Layout, and I promise I'm going to explain why I do this. It's actually in Table Design. So let me go to Borders, and I'll click on No Borders. Now the reason I do this is it's going to make things line up a lot easier. It just kind of structures everything, because you can see that there's border lines in here right now, but once this is converted into a PDF, all these lines are actually going to go away. As you can see in our example over here, this actually is a table. You can see everything's lined up nice and neat. And maybe this isn't a perfect example, but if you've got a big old form and you want to make sure things are spaced appropriately and everything and lined up good, table is a really easy way to do that. So that's what I usually do, and so that's the first thing that we've done here. The next thing that we'll do, I'll just kind of copy what I did over there. I'm not going to try to make this look good, because I know you can spend a lot of time, and this is really just simple Word stuff, but I will make this a little bit bigger. Invoice, and let's check over here. So we've got invoice number, date, client, and then we're going to have a table down here, description, date, and price. Alright, so let me go back to our Word file over here. So we got invoice, number, client, and date. Don't know if that's the right order, but there we go. Then we have description, date of the service or product for our invoice items, and price right here, and at the bottom we're going to have total price. That's working out all right. And again, I'm not going to take too much time in making this look nice. I want to just give you the idea of how this all works, and then when you really can make these look nice, though, I've spent some time, and they can really turn out pretty great. So let's actually now go over here. I'll shrink this in a little bit right there. And the first thing we're going to do, so this right now is all just static, right? None of this text is going to change, but we do want to put in some fields here, and these fields are where we're going to pull in data dynamically. And so what I mean by that is based on the data that we're getting, this invoice number that I'm going to put right here where this cursor is, that's going to be different. The client is going to be different, right? All these things are going to be different based on the data I'm pulling. So that's why I need some fields to come in. So to actually do that, to add fields, you might have noticed them at the beginning with my other word template example, but we're actually going to come up to this developer tab. You normally don't see this tab. If you do want to have this enabled, you can right click on one of the tabs. So I can go to view and right click and then come to customize the ribbon. Once I do that, I can just make sure right over here on the right, I can look at this developer box and just check it. So if mine isn't checked, I'll just check on that and then hit OK. And then you should see the developer tab show up right here. There's a lot of options on here, but the only ones we're really going to care about is this controls section. And although you can actually use all of these controls in Word, the Power Automate or the Populate a Microsoft Word template action isn't going to allow you to use all of these, which is kind of a bummer, but that's all right. Let me go through the 3 that do work. So the first one is this one right here. If you hover over it, it'll say plain text content control. This one right here next to it is the rich text. This doesn't work, so that's any HTML text, right? That one is the one I would love to have working. You can really do a lot with that. But that one doesn't work. Populate a word template, the action and flow, which we'll go over in just a little bit. Any of these fields you add, they just won't show up for you to be able to put data into. And that'll make more sense a little later on. But the plain text content control is the first one, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see this little content control pops up right here. And if I just make sure I've selected it, I'll come over here to properties. And the only thing I need to do right here is name it. And here's another quick suggestion. So this is a really simple form, but lots of the times we'll have a lot of different names for our fields. And sometimes we name things that aren't exactly the same as what we might see on the form. So for example, the field I want to put in here might be called number, but you can see it's saying invoice number right here. So what I normally do is instead of putting invoice number, I'm going to just type in the name, the exact name of the field I'm going to use. So I'm pretty sure, if I can remember right, our field in SharePoint is called invoice number. I'll leave it like that. I won't worry about it too much with this example, but if I've had these forms where we've got 40 different controls on here and there's 40 different fields, and things can get real complicated, and the more simple you make for yourself, you're going to save some time and save yourself some headaches. It does get a little confusing trying to manage which field is which, right? So that's all we're going to do. We don't have to do anything else. I'll just hit OK, and you can see the field name is now showing up right there. And we're going to see this field name in the flow once we get to that step. So I'm going to add 2 more of these. Right there, I'll call this one, go to properties and just call this one client. And I'll add this date one, call this date. And now this actually one more right here is the total price. I'll go up to this one. And I can actually just click on properties and I'll say total price. Hit OK. And let's see, so now we have 2 other controls that are going to work. And the second one we'll go over is actually just an image. You can notice example here, we just have a little image of a tree. Images are kind of interesting. Normally you're not going to bring in a dynamic image, right? So normally maybe right here you'd put the image of your company, and you could just do that in Word if you needed to. If that was just going to be the same image no matter what, I could just come over here and insert a picture or something like that. But if you do need to put in a different image, maybe you're going to put in the logo of the company that relates to the invoice or something like that, and that's going to be different each invoice, then you could put in the invoice control or the image control. So that's just this one right here, the little picture on it. So I'll click on that. I'll shrink this up. There we go. And I am going to change the name from picture to, I'll just call this logo. Change it like that. And now the last control we're going to do is probably the most complicated one. But once you get your head wrapped around it, it's really pretty simple. But basically what we're going to do is I'm first going to highlight all these cells here, and we're going to merge them. So now I just have one blank row. And the next thing we're going to do is actually insert a table within inside of this row. So I'm going to come over here, and I'll explain why I'm doing this in just a moment. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 columns. And now I'm going to highlight this table here, and I'm going to come over to the Developer tab. And you have to make sure the table is highlighted to use this last type of control. And what it's called is a repeating section content control. So if you're watching this, you might have heard of these, you might not have. Basically what this is going to allow us to do is, let me just click on it real quick. So now I've put a control around this entire table right here. If I click on these little dots right here, it's going to select the whole table. That means you're pretty sure you've done it right. And I'll go to properties, and I'm just going to say table. And so now what this is going to allow us to do is I'm going to be allowed to put in as many items as I need here. So when I'm creating an invoice, sometimes there's 1 item right here, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 10. And so what this allows me to do is just put in however many items I need to, and it's going to adapt to that. And so that's really nice, because then I could have technically done, one of these fields right here, these text fields, 1 for description, 1 for date, 1 for price, and done 3 rows of that same thing. But then I could only have 3 invoice items, if that makes sense. With this repeating section table, I'm able to have as many as I want. And the great thing is since it's put inside of Word, or it's put inside of this table, if this table grows, if I have 10 items, this whole thing is just going to come down here, and the total price right here will be lined up just great. And it'll work out pretty well. So that's what this one is. It's a little confusing, maybe if it's new to you. Oh geez, it's really confusing. There we go. But I think you'll get the hang of it. You'll get the idea once we get into the Power Automate portion. Let me come over here real quick. So you can see right here I just have 2. This is 1 repeating section control, but there's 2 items that got passed into it. If I did another invoice and just put in 3, then there'd be 3 rows of items, right? The last thing I need to do actually is just get rid of that space. Once I click inside of this table, I'm going to add in other fields. So I know I have a description, date, and a price. So I'll put the description right here. And these will just be text fields. I'll put in description and the date, and 1 more text field, and I'll do the price. So that's how that works. I've got 3 different fields inside of here: price, date, and description. It's basically a mini list of data that's going to show up in here. Let me just pull this over here. It's a little better. The last thing we'll need to do is highlight the entire thing, and we're just going to change the font color to black. And there we go. So that'll look really nice there. Our nice pretty invoice form. And I'm actually not going to upload this into our SharePoint library since we already have one, but let me show you how that works real quick. Okay, so here is our SharePoint library, and this is on our Showcase HR little demo site here, and I've got a library called Example Documents. And what I'm doing here is I've just put in a invoice template 1 as the Word file of our template. And I have a little image right here. This is our tree image that we see in the little example PDF. And what I like to do is if you're going to use a lot of these, which lots of the times you'll have just a bunch of these and they'll start piling up. You can store them in OneDrive, but I like to put them in a SharePoint library and only share access with people that are going to want to be able to edit these. If you're building this for a client, it's great to be able to share these templates with clients. And something that I love about this is because it's very little code, especially just with these templates, is if I wanted someone, if I've built this solution for someone and I've handed it off to them, then the great thing is I can sleep well at night knowing that they can just come in here and change something if they need to. They can't change it completely unless maybe they watch this video or something like that. But what they can do is they can open up the template, and if they wanted to, change this to a different color, make the font different, space things out differently, add another image into the document, make it look prettier, right? They can totally do that without needing to call you and spend some of your time on doing that. So that's why I like this solution a lot, is it allows the customer to really own the solution, at least a good bit of it. If they wanted to add fields, they might have to ask you or watch this video or something like that, right? But it's to just do these basic Word things, most people can do that, so that's a great thing. Coming back into our library though, let's now build out the flow section. And now we'll come to our flow portion of this video. And I'm going to click on the create. And I'm not going to focus too much on how we're going to get the data or what type of flow we're using, because it really doesn't matter. The populate a word action or word template action can really work with a bunch of different styles or types of flows. Can come from when an item is created or modified, or maybe it's happening, it's getting a bunch of data, summing the data up, and then storing those totals in different fields in the template, right? So this doesn't have to relate to just one item, but we're going to go ahead and just click on when an item is created or modified, and I'll click on create. And next we're going to choose our site. And we'll choose our invoice list. So let's choose our little invoice list right here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the get items action. Now this is just depending on how I've set this up. So I actually have a separate list for our invoice items, that table with the repeating section control. So I'm going to get this really quick. Go to our invoice items table. And I'm going to do a filter query right here. And all I'm going to say is title equals, and then I'll come over here to get the invoice number. And again, this is just how I've set up the data. I'll try to go over this real quick. But now I'm going to get all the invoice items that pertain to the invoice that we've created. And once I've done that, I'm now going to do the populate a word template action. So I'll click on populate a Microsoft Word template. It is a premium action, but it's so worth it. It's definitely something that a lot of clients have enjoyed having this. And the next thing we'll do is select the location. There we go, there's our SharePoint site. Our document library is the example documents. And our file is going to be the invoice template, so you'll notice it's not pulling up that other image that was in there. It's only going to get Word documents in here. So I'll select that, and as soon as I select this, it's going to start bringing in all of our fields and our field names right here. So here's our invoice number field, the date, here's our table, our repeating section table that looks a little bit different. And for some reason, the picture field has come over like this. Not entirely sure why it did that. That's why I always like to rename the images. And this is an old one where I don't think I renamed that field. But that's why it came over like that. But this is our picture field, so we'll put the picture right here. But the next thing we're going to do is start to fill out some of these things. So the invoice number, all I'm going to do is put in the dynamic content for invoice number. The date, I'll do the same thing. So right there. And the client is right there. And this is, again, why I like to name my Word template fields the same as exactly what I'm going to put in there, because then I just read that, type it in, click on it. It's a lot faster than trying to remember what field goes to which doesn't apply to every situation, but it does happen. So the total right here, I'll do total, which is actually invoice amount. So you can see right there, it gets a little confusing, even though that one wasn't too bad. And lastly, we have our picture, and then we have our repeating section. So these simple text fields are really easy, right? We could maybe format the number right here, but the picture is not too bad. We will cover that at the very end. but this one is the next one we'll go over, is this repeating section control. You can see that right now what I could do is put in a description right here, and a date and a price and so on, and then I can add another item and do the same thing, right? But this is really limiting because I can, I have to put in 1 and 2 items, right? If I want to allow the person to be able to put in as many items as they need, I'm going to need to do something a little differently. And so what I can do is come over to this switch to input entire array and click on that. And the great thing about this is it's actually going to save me a little bit of time, because if I put a little bit of data into here, it's going to create this little syntax for me right here. I'm going to get rid of our second item. And you'll see why this is helpful in just a moment, because I'm actually going to copy this and take it out. And we're going to come up here and create an array variable to store our invoice items into. Initialize variable, and I'll just call it table. We'll make sure it's an array. And then I'll add one more action. We're going to use the append to array action. Alright, put in the table. And the next thing I'm going to do is paste in that same syntax. So it's really pretty easy. It's description, and then what you want to be in the description, date, what you want to be in the date, right? And it's not too difficult. I'm going to get rid of these straight brackets here. And the next thing we're going to want to do is put in what we want to go into these items. So the append to array variable is going to add an item into the array, into our array variable. And we want to use this action for every item that the get items action is going to get. So what I can do is type over here and do description. Make sure it's coming from get items. And it's going to put that into apply to each. You can see that I'm looping through each one of the items from the get items action. So each one of our invoice items, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to come down here and I'll put in the date, which will be the get items date, comma, and well, let me get rid of that, I guess. There we go. Let me get rid of that, and I'll put in the price here. There we go. And so now our little table here is nice and ready. So the great thing about this is it's pretty simple, it's pretty easy to do. You just use this append to array variable action, make sure you got your syntax right with what fields there are in there. Put in the dynamic content. So now this variable should be ready to just put straight into the Populate a Microsoft Word template action. So let me close these. And again, if you have any questions about that, I know that is a little confusing, just put them in the comments section down below. I try to answer every one of the comments. Let me come over here to the table. I'll put in the table variable, and that should be good to go. Last thing we're going to do is just put in the image here, so I can show you how to do that real quick, and then we'll test this thing out. So I'm going to add an action, and we're just going to do the get file content. So there's lots of different ways of getting a file, right? I could get file properties and select a certain file that I'm wanting. But the end thing you're going to need to do if you're getting a file from SharePoint is use the get file content action. So I'm going to click on that right here. I'm going to select the site, and I'll click on this little icon. I'll go to our example documents, and I know it's this trees are us example. Click on that, and that's getting the file content for that file right there. It's not the perfect example because I'm getting the same one every time no matter what, so it's pretty redundant, right? But anyways, that's going to show you a little bit of how that works. If you do need to get a file from SharePoint or OneDrive, you're going to do a similar action just like that. And then for this field right here, I'm just going to put the file content of the get file content action. And so now if we ran this, the flow would then grab all of this data. When we create a new invoice item, it would go get the invoice items related to our invoice, get this picture right here, and put in all the data nice and neatly into our Word template. but this Word template doesn't have anywhere to be saved or sent to, right? So we still need to do something there. So the next step I'm going to do is actually, first I'm going to create a file in OneDrive, and then I'm going to take that file created in OneDrive and use the convert a file to PDF OneDrive action to create it into a PDF. So create file. There's a few different ways of creating PDFs. This is the same one I do every time. I don't have a great folder for this, so I'll just do the root. But if you're doing this for another client, it is nice to put these in a specific OneDrive folder. And I'll give you a last little tip at the end here on how to kind of manage this a little bit better. So the file name, this is a good tip for this, is I normally do invoice, and then I do put some dynamic content in here. Start typing dynamic content, let's type in invoice number. And then you could even do a dash and put in like the ID of the invoice item from SharePoint, just so you can find the specific item this was running on. And the reason I do this, I put in the dynamic content, is so that it better ensures, let me add in the .docx real quick. I do this, I name it this way because if I have multiple of these running at the same time, and our file name was just invoice.docx, if I ran multiple of these at the same time, they would kind of step over each other, right? Because I've named the file the same thing, and it's going to the same folder and everything. So that's why I like to put in the dynamic content there. It makes it so it's not going to step on each other. If you are running a ton of these, I'll give you a tip on how to manage that a little better so you don't have just a million files in your OneDrive. For the file content though, in the create file, we're going to put in Microsoft Word document, so that'll be our Word template all nice and filled out. The next thing we're going to do is start typing convert. It should show up there. Convert file. Well, let's use convert file right here. The unique identifier for the file will come from this one, ID, or the unique identifier for the file. Put that right there, and it's that easy. I could, choose something else, I guess, but I'll leave that as PDF. And for our last step is we can now, now that this file is converted, we can send it an email. We can create a new file in SharePoint. Do lots of different things with it. I'm going to just do the send email action here. And I'll put my email in here. There we go. Subject will be new PDF. Here's a new invoice for you. Here we go. Nice and professional. I'll hit the advanced options, change the importance to normal. And for attachments, I'll just say invoice. Maybe put in the invoice number here. And this time it'll be .pdf, since it'll be a PDF. And the attachment content will be from the convert file, the file content. And now lastly, what we can do, as I said I was going to explain at the end to help manage our files in OneDrive, is we can use the delete file for OneDrive for Business. I'll put that right here. And so once we've actually sent this file out, you could probably technically put it back here, but what I just like to put this at the end just so I make sure that the email gets sent out, and then I go and delete the file. Is I'm now going to click on this and put in ID from create file. And so all it's going to do, it's going to create a new file in OneDrive, convert it to a PDF, send it out, and then delete that same file. So that might be what you want to do. Maybe you do want to store it somewhere. If you're just sending it out an email, maybe you would want to store it somewhere. But we're just going to leave it just like that. And I'll go ahead and click on save. And let's go test this thing out. And in my little Power Apps application I built, I'm going to click on new invoice. And for our invoice number, we'll say 777. Date is today. The client is Trees Are Us. Let's add some invoice items. So we'll say new tree. And we'll say this is a nice tree, so it's $500. It's got gold leaves or something like that. And we're going to say tree installation, $40. Lastly, watering the tree, $10. All right, so our total is $550 and our invoice number is 777. So let's go ahead and click on save here. And we'll get taken to our nice little success screen. I do have a video on how to create an animated success screen similar to that one. The description or the link to that video will be down in the description below. And if we check our email, we can see that our invoice is looking pretty good. It looks very similar to the other one, but we've got our nice tree here. Our invoice number is 777. Today's date, client is tree is RS. New tree, tree installation, watering the tree. The total is $550. Of course, this doesn't look perfect, but I hope you've been able to think of some different use cases for this. This is great for summary reports. You can actually change your Word template so it's a landscape format, so it's now horizontal instead of like this where it's vertical. I've seen these used just everywhere. They work really great. That's really awesome. Again, it's great to leave in the client's hands because they can edit the templates a little bit. Maybe you don't even want to convert it to a PDF. You just want to get someone started on a Word document that they're going to keep editing and using later. That also works pretty great as well. But again, let me know if you have any comments or questions. We do Power Apps services, Power Apps training. We'll help you build the app for you. I do have a Power Apps training course actually on our website at sovereignsp.com. About a 3-hour long training course. We also do training on Power Automate. Got some great blogs on there, so go check those out. And thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.